So in this video I want to talk about my battery relocation project. So in the Toyota MR2, the first gen, the battery is located in the rear, in the engine compartment, and it's kind of a bad placement. The battery's sort of in your way whenever you're doing any work on the engine. The battery's quite large and quite heavy, and especially if you're doing an engine swap or anything like that, it just gets annoying. As you can see here, this is the front of the car, this is the frunk. And we don't really have very much in the frunk. I mean, if you don't want to carry a spare tire, it's pretty empty. And so what you actually have is a weight bias to the rear, and you want to try and move some of that weight forward, so why not move a heavy battery to the front? So I went ahead and did that. Lots of people like to do this, and I just want to talk about how I did it, and maybe give some people ideas, or, helpful criticism to myself. So the first off thing here is I went and upgraded my battery to an Odyssey PC680. It's a smaller battery. It's not as big as the stock huge unit. It's a little bit on the pricier side, but I wanted to say, if I'm going to be doing this project anyway, might as well upgrade my battery to something a little bit better. So the first thing here is to decide where in the front of your car you want to place your battery. Now there's a couple different options. What I did is I made a cutout of the profile of the battery out of cardboard and just tried moving it around, seeing where it would fit nicely. A lot of people put it right on the floor, right in the center of the frunk. I wanted to keep that area open because I might want to create some ducting for my radiator flow later. So I wanted to try and keep the center area open. So I wanted to move the battery somewhere around the edges of the frunk lining. I went ahead and decided that the front left, so this is the passenger side, was a good candidate. And so what I needed to do was to make a mounting platform. So for this project, it's really good to be able to know how to weld. Get yourself a MIG welder, not very expensive. Learn how to MIG weld, and you can make things like this battery mount. It's nice and solid. It creates a really nice mounting area. You can have a nice tie down. So I went and got something cheap off eBay that looks good to tie this down. So once that's all done, you need another area to put your fuses. So you're going to have a main power cable. This is going to be a 1 or 0 gauge power cable. This is going to go through the car to the back of the engine. This is going to power, go to your alternator. It's going to power your engine harness, and you want this to be nice and thick. And this needs a 150 amp fuse. So I went and bought myself a resettable fuse off eBay for this purpose, and I needed somewhere to mount it. So I knew I was going to have several different fuses. So what I did is I welded in a angle bracket right beside the battery, just as a fuse mounting area. So this 150 amp fuse is for the main power line to the rear of the car. You can see here, in comes the power. On the other side, out goes through, and it's going to go through the cabin to the rear of the car. The second power line here is to an 80 amp resettable fuse, and this goes into the cabin. And this is to power my new amplifier and speaker system. And as you can see, the gauge of the wire is much less. This is an 8 gauge versus a 1 or 0 gauge. Next thing here is to ground everything. You want to ground your battery, very meticulously, and at several different ground locations. So as you can see, I have 3 ground points. I have an 8 gauge to the bolt here, a 2 gauge, I believe, two 2 gauge wires. One is to the stock ground location. You can see other wires here coming in to ground at this location, and then one goes up here to the strut, one of the strut bolts. So I just wanted to have, some nice ground areas to make sure that everything's grounded properly and have no troubles. And again, all these battery cables have to be measured and created yourself. You can look at my battery cable creation video for that. Another little touch here is I'm adding fog lights to the front of my car, and so I had a fog light fuse. It's actually mounted underneath these 2 resettable fuses underneath here, and so this angle bracket here really created a nice workspace and sort of shelf area to mount all my different fuses. And this is the cable here running from this fog light fuse around the side of the frunk to my fog lights. So battery's been moved to the front, we have resettable fuses, we've grounded everything properly. Now we have to run that power line to the back of the car, And what does that power line go to? Well, I talked about this in a different video, but I've created these power distribution blocks. So this is the one that's going to go in the engine bay. And so this 1/0 gauge wire is going to go into the power distribution block. And then this will provide all the power I need in the engine bay to any of my components. So if I ever decide to add fans, extra lights, you name it, whatever, this can power it. Because I also have a power going into the cabin from my amplifier, I needed a different setup for the cabin. So if we look at now what I did for that, is I created a sort of a mount board here using a laser cutter, and this is just out of acrylic. And so we have, again, just like before, a power distribution block. This one's slightly different. It only has an 8 gauge input, 8 gauge output, and different size, smaller gauges on the side. And this is because this is going to be powering the amplifier. I'm also upgrading my speakers to 6.5 inch, and they have these separate tweeters and woofers, so that we have these signal processing blocks that I had to mount, so one for each of the speakers. So these are also mounted in this board, and this is going to go behind the passenger glove compartment, and it will be mounted to this piece right here, and this will be welded into the bar on the passenger side, underneath the glove compartment. So we have a power distribution block in the cabin to power all my aftermarket gauges, my amplifier, anything I need. So really, that's it. It's a big project. If you want to do it properly, you need to have the proper tools. A MIG welder is a really must for this. Being able to produce high quality battery cables is also a must. You need the proper tools for that job as well. And just one last note here before I leave. You might be wondering where these cables are going, how they're going through this firewall into the cabin or through the car. Well, actually, I removed my air conditioning unit, and so there's actually 2 holes already with some nice rubber bumpers in there to protect the wires. 2 holes into the cabin where the AC lines used to go to the condenser. And so those are empty now because the AC system is out, so those battery cables just go right through there. Now if you don't have those, you can drill them. They're located just underneath the fuse box there. Alright, good luck.